On the Road with Auntie Dem, the podcast I'm recording as I do a cross-country drive all the way from San Francisco to Tampa, Florida. If you hear some hissing in the background, well, that's my air conditioning going, and no, I know it's good podcast etiquette to turn air conditioners and fans and all that kind of stuff off while you record, but it's late June in the desert, and it's well over 100 degrees outside, and what it would be in this closed car if I didn't have this air conditioner going, I don't even want to think about it. So no, sorry, you'll just have to put up with the hissing. I'm somewhere out in the California desert, far away from the cities, and I've just pulled away from the Mojave Air and Spaceport, which serves a number of purposes. It is a graveyard for old retired airliners. They come out here once their 25 years or so of service is done, get stripped of usable parts, and then get cut up for scrap. And, you know, it's a little bit of a depressing sight, but it's still an interesting one where they have just acres and acres of these old airliners getting cut up. Made for some good pictures. I stopped and took out my camera, ignoring the no photography signs that are posted all over the place. Took some pictures of that, took some pictures of Virgin Galactic's headquarters, where they keep Spaceship One and will soon keep a revived version of Spaceship Two. There's all kinds of cool, weird stuff out at Mojave. There's old fighter planes that were used for who knows what that are either still flying or being cut apart. There's piles of old scrapped military equipment. I spotted a couple of old tanks sitting around somewhere. There's companies that have rocket parts around. It's really pretty interesting. And you can go up and have a look at it, which is not the case for Edwards Air Force Base just up the road, which is where the Air Force keeps all of its sort of secret stuff, and has for many, many years. Edwards is where the X-1 broke through the sound barrier for the first time. It's where the X-15 program was. All sorts of Air Force test stuff is out there. And really, it's fascinating for anyone who has a fascination with big, heavy, fast, sleek kind of technology, as opposed to, you know, cell phones and laptops and all that, which we tend to think of when we say the word technology. But really, it is impressive and it isn't. Sure, it does theoretically put the entirety of human knowledge at your fingertips, but really, what do most people use it for? Well, they use it for porn, or they use it for Facebook, or they use it for sending incredibly inane text messages to each other. I guess that's what happens when you have a democratized technology. It's also why we tend to overvalue it, I think. And we tend not to think of the stuff that I just saw at Mojave when we think of technology. I mean, that is high technology out there at Mojave. Did you see the video of them landing a rocket back on a barge after shooting it into space? I mean, that's just amazing. But that's not what most people think about when they think of technology. They think of their iPhone, because their iPhone is theirs, because they can use it. How many people were ever shot into space on the Apollo missions? What, 20 maybe or so? The last American to have walked on the moon is now over 75, so you can feel a certain maybe patriotic pull for the space program, but you don't feel any personal connection to it. I mean, how could you? In many ways, that technology is extremely elitist. The guys who went on the Apollo missions, I mean, those were guys who had hundreds of missions over Korea, who had IQs, 2 standard deviations above normal, who were experienced test pilots who also had PhDs in engineering. They were some impressive specimens. And they're not you and me. You and me, well, we've got our cell phones, so we feel that as technology. That's something that has personal meaning to us, because we use it all the time. Of course, that means that it suffers from the trollization that any democratized technology suffers from. And it takes our view away from things that are perhaps more impressive from the standpoint of humanity as a whole. Speaking of which, this ties into something that I sort of got inspired to talk about when I was driving around the Mojave spaceport, looking at all the cool rockets and airplanes and all that. But it is something also that I brought up a little bit in our last couple of podcasts, and has to do with the degeneration of the left. So let me ask you a question. What is the vision for the left right now? What is the future vision for it, looking down the road? Yes, I know it's utopian, so its vision is utopia. Okay, but what exactly does that look like? What are we talking about here when we say that? I understand what the vision was for Soviet Marxism in 1927. I can look at propaganda posters and they show, there's Lenin standing there pointing the way towards the future, and in the background there are airplanes and motor cars and trains and skyscrapers and zeppelins and all the stuff that seemed really, really super high technology in the 1920s. So the idea of them building a high-tech world, but not only doing that, doing it in a way that was humane, in a way that didn't abuse people, in a way that brought peace, that brought justice to the world. And I'm not saying they delivered on any of this, don't get me wrong. There is a strong difference between the dream that they offered and the reality that they delivered, which is something that's really, really hard to get through to any dead-ender Marxist still out there. I don't care what the promise was. I only care what the reality that they delivered was. Why would I care about anything else? Look, any two-bit con man, any snake oil salesman, any charlatan can make you huge promises. So what? What's important isn't what someone promises, it's what they can actually deliver. That's what's important. And I would much rather deal with someone who promises me a lot less, but can actually deliver what they promise, sooner than chase some utopian vision that will never, ever, ever, ever be reality. But okay, that aside, let's still look at the vision. Any political point of view that doesn't have a futurism to it doesn't really have a vision. And I can look at, say, American futurism of the 1950s, the stuff of the Jetsons, of Googie architecture, and the stuff of the age when science fiction was just amazing, the Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke age. And I can see there a vision of the future. But there was also French futurism, and there was Marxist futurism. Marxism definitely, especially in the 20th century, in the Soviet Union and China, had a recognizable futurism to it. Even just looking at some of the stuff they did build, the Stalinist architecture, the Seven Sisters, the worker and kolkhoz woman statue. These are all examples of things that are futurist, that look out into the future and have a vision for it. I understand where the Soviet Union thought it was going. Again, that it didn't deliver on it, that it couldn't deliver on it, is a separate issue. But I know where it thought it was going. What is the vision for Western, liberal, politically correct, cultural Marxist leftism? I don't see any such thing out there. I mean, really, what is it? Is it two married gay parents with an adopted black daughter posting pictures of themselves onto Facebook? Is that it? I mean, okay, yeah, they say equality. Equality in what? Equality moldering in a cubicle somewhere collecting dust until you retire? What? Getting universal basic income and sitting on your ass in front of an Xbox until you croak? Is that the vision of the future? Is it enough money to get by on and a whole bunch of easy sex and not having to take any real responsibility for anything other than showing up at a job at 9 o'clock in the morning? Is that it? What is the vision of the future? Which is relevant because going to Mojave puts one in the mindset of the future. So you start to ask, do these people have any vision? And since leftism has, let's face it, become feminized, has that taken a vision from it? Let's face it, women on their own were never going to build space rockets, we're never going to build skyscrapers, we're never going to build Zeppelins or airplanes or any of that stuff from the old Lenin posters. For women, there's just a vague emotional idea of we'll all be equal and everyone will be nice to each other. Or worse, the nanny state kindergarten teacher vision of we'll all be nice to each other or else. But if there's a vision to aspire to, I just don't see it. What would you put on a poster for modern leftism? If you got all the Tumblristas together and had them make a poster for the future of what they see if and when their vision comes true, what would it be? What is on that poster? It's not space rockets. Look at the I fucking love science crowd. Look at how they have democratized, popularized, and cheapened the idea of science altogether. You know, Maddox, who does the best page in the universe, and his style of humor can get a little old after a while, but he made a really, really good point. I'll put a link to his post on this in the description below. He said that these people are by no means interested in anything having to do with science. They just want to signal that they are rational, intelligent, logical, as opposed to all the knuckle draggers that are out at church on Sunday. That's all they're interested in doing. It's just an extension of fuck you, Dad, which is all that new atheism is. It's the cult of fuck you, Dad. Okay, but that's not a vision of the future, is it? Now, there have been some people, I think this was Bret Stephens. I wish I knew well enough to really be confident in giving credit. I think it was Bret Stephens who said that precisely the problem with communism was that they were specific about their vision. That they put stuff on a poster and said, okay, out here in 50, 60, 70 years, this is what the future will look like. This is what your children will be living in. And thus, 50, 60, 70 years downstream from the Bolshevik Revolution, people could look at the world and say, well, does it look like that? No? Okay, well then I guess something's wrong. Whereas with Western politically correct cultural Marxist leftism, there is no promise made. Everything is vague. And thus there is never the opportunity to hold what they deliver up against what they promise and say, how does this stacking up? Which of course would be useful for stuff like the welfare state. To say, okay, we've spent 50 years and trillions of dollars on programs to eliminate poverty. How's that working out for us? And with them always there's another excuse, another rationalization. Well, if only we pour this much more money into it, if only we give it this much more trillions of dollars, if only racism goes away completely and totally, as long as there's one person who doesn't like black people out there, our entire $1 trillion 50-year experiment in eliminating poverty among black people, well, of course it's going to fail. Huh? Really? If it's that fragile, then it just doesn't work, does it? Well, of course, that's the attitude of a knuckle dragger. So maybe it is a strategic decision to not be very specific. But you know what? I kind of don't think it is. I just think we're in a period of societal degeneration. We're in a period of collapse where even the forces of collapse have lost the vision, have lost the thread, who don't know where they're going. All they know is that it's fun to signal. All that leftism has become is basically the politics of eternal adolescence. It's, I want to have any kind of sex I want with anyone I want without anybody saying anything bad about it. I want Big Daddy government to be there in case I skin my knee or crash my car. And third, I want to signal so that I can be part of the popular kids crowd. That's all that leftism is now. Just as the only parts of science that mean anything to leftists are evolution and global warming, and only then because they can use them to signal how not knuckle-draggery they are. Similarly, those are the only things that mean anything to leftists in terms of politics anymore. Even the wreckers have lost their way. Even the destroyers have lost their vision, and how sad is that? I don't know where any of this is going. I mean, I know it's going to collapse. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know whether there's going to be some sort of rightist takeover and they're going out of helicopters, or whether there's going to be breakup, or whether, like the Soviet Union, it's just going to collapse under its own weight. I don't know. But again, I don't even know where it thinks it's going, other than extremely vague platitudes that just, how could they mean anything to anybody? How could they mean anything even to the people who are spouting them? I don't get it. I don't see it. Because a vision of the future is what I'm seeing out here at Mojave. There are smart people who are trying to do big things. Say what you will about Richard Branson, but he's got a vision of something he wants to happen, something he wants to be a part of the future. He has a way he wants the future to look, and he's doing his own little bit to be a part of it. I don't think we'll reach that future. Sorry to say. I think the forces of entropy will come get us long before that happens. But it's still an impressive picture. And still standing out here in the desert looking at it, it can't help but stir a man's soul. To stir the soul of someone who grew up in the era of big, loud, impressive, beautiful, huge machines that were blasting off and flying off into a future that we couldn't predict, but at least we had aspirations for. So that's what I thought coming away from the Mojave Air and Spaceport. And the fact that even leftism has degenerated from a place where they did have a vision for that future to a place where, if there is a vision for the future, it's a bunch of pink dye-haired, overweight, problem glasses, genetic dead ends who will never reproduce, angrily signaling to each other over laptops with dirty keyboards. Where that's the vision of the future, how can one help but not be sad about that? The right has pessimism for the current system, a desire to return to something better, but for heaven's sakes, if there's a vision the left has, I don't see it. It's got nothing. Well, those are my thoughts from the Mojave Air and Spaceport. As I pass the technology behind and head out into the big wide desert towards Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'll have lots of thoughts about Las Vegas. It's a town that'll make you thoughtful. So I'll share my thoughts with you then. See you on down the road.